The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily express those of W Rock Radio and its sponsors. All shows are independently owned and broadcast for entertainment purposes only. Readers and listeners are advised that neither W Rock Radio nor its owners and agents shall be held liable for the content of programs. Website content and any audio produced and streamed by W Rock Radio is protected copyright and may not be recorded, rebroadcast, redistributed, or reused without express written permission from W Rock Radio.
Sometimes we need to slow it down, take a look around and breathe. 'Cause these times go by so very fast, moments never last. Just breathe, breathe in, breathe out, quiet, be still, don't shout. Love is what it's all about. Sometimes when you feel you've had enough, living is just too tough. Just breathe, 'cause you'll regret when these days are past. Your friend has seen your last. Just breathe, breathe in, breathe out, quiet, be still, don't shout. Love is what it's all about. Just breathe. Breathe in, breathe out. Love is what it's all about. Be quiet, be still, don't shout. Just breathe. Just love. Just love. Just love.
Hi, and welcome to the Just Love Show. Good evening, good afternoon, good day, good morning, whatever time in the world it is, whatever day it is. Welcome to the Just Love Show. Thank you so much for joining me. Start off like we do every show. Let's sit back and take a deep breath and think about all the things we have to be thankful for. Last week during the show, at the opening show, I had mentioned to really what abundance means to me and what I'm giving thankful for. And that means literally everything from the most subatomic particle you can possibly imagine to the largest suns, black holes, that again, the largest things we can possibly imagine, and loving those things as if they were my brother, mother, sister, father, lover, because these things are innate to our being. They give us life, and if we don't love and cherish all the things that give us life the way we do love the physical things in our world, then we're not really loving life. So for myself, when I'm talking about the abundance that we should be giving thankful for, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the most microscopic bacteria that came out of the oceans that formed on this planet that are still what makes our internal ecosystems thrive, and out to the external world, to the sun that shines on us, that gives life to this whole planet. We don't stop and understand our connection to these things. We don't understand what a loving, giving, thriving ecosystem that we are a part of here. And it's important that we stop and we embrace that again, because we've forgotten that for far too long, and it's led us to a fairly precarious situation. Anyway, before I move on, I want to do my showly reading, if you will. So here's what I picked for today. Our only real control in any experience of life we come to have is our choice to love or to fear what is. I choose love, then I surrender I. Let go, let go, let go. Lose your body, your flesh, your form. Regain your love, your spirit, your soul. And then I followed up with a couple of quotes from Minds Much Greater Than Mine. This was from Eckhart Tolle. Always say yes to the present moment. What could be more futile, more insane than to create an inner resistance to what already is? What could be more insane than to oppose life itself, which is now and always now? Surrender to what is, say yes to life, and see how life suddenly starts working for you rather than against you. And again, that was Eckhart Tolle. And this is from Marianne Williamson. Something amazing happens when we surrender and just love. We melt into another world, a realm of power already within us. The world changes when we change. The world softens when we soften. The world loves us when we choose to love the world. And I can't think of a better way to lead into my guest for tonight. I've started to become friends with my guest tonight over the past year. I got to know him through Harold Becker and John Goltz, dear friends of the show from the Love Foundation. And my guest is an executive director, board member for the Love Foundation, along with having his own spiritual pursuits through newliving.org and new teachings that he puts out to us that has been his lifelong pursuit. Without further ado, I'd like to bring on my special guest and hopefully new friend, Mr. Phillip Snow.
Hello, Kip. How are you?
I am well, Phillip. I'm not even going to put up the charade that we didn't do this yesterday. But to start off, like we discussed, the show's always about people telling their journey, how it began, the things that you've discovered along the way, some practical takeaways that the listeners can apply in their own life. But in your bio, you start off by saying, never married, not looking, man on a mission. So let's start when that man found his mission.
Well, this man found my mission when I was 12 years old. Now, I'm going back a bit now. In fact, I'm going back even further than that. I'm going back to when I first started awakening to love and what it was all about in the 1940s. So we're talking a long time here, and you might ask, well, why am I still working on my mission? Why is it taking so long? In actual fact, to answer that question, the time is now when I'm completely fulfilling my mission. I'll come around to that. But in the 1940s, when I was 4 years old, and this is 1949, so I'm 70 years old now, my mother took me for an interview with the headmistress of a school, a small private school near to where we lived, where my parents wanted me to go. And during the interview, the headmistress said, yes, but he's left-handed. He can't be left-handed. We're going to have to teach him how to be right-handed. Well, my mother said, no. This isn't going to happen. Because she knew that King George VI, who was still on the throne at this time, believe it or not, he was the man who had the stammer, as most of us have heard recently in the film The King's Speech. She knew that it was said that the king got his stammer by being changed from being left-handed to writing right-handed. She wasn't going to let that happen to me, for which I am eternally thankful. Now, that did 2 or 3 things for me. First of all, it gave me the experience of being discriminated against, my first experience. And that was a very good thing for me to happen at that time, because ever since then, I've had a degree of empathy with anyone who is discriminated against for whatever kind of reasonable reason. And it kind of set me on the path of becoming more aware of loving. It also meant that I had to go to a state school where the children were of a much broader range of social backgrounds. And you might know that in Britain, and especially in those days, there were really quite clear class distinctions. And I'd been brought up in a kind of middle-classish family and hadn't had very much knowledge and contact with the working class children. But the school that I went to had working class children. I began to see that there were really quite some distinctions there, where there was a difference. There seemed to be a difference in the level of kind of prosperity, and to some degree they seemed to be somewhat underprivileged compared to the children that I'd been in contact with before. And it began to give me the idea that there was something that was not quite right about this. And I wasn't, I was a child at that time, and I wasn't clear about exactly what it was. But it was something that was being brought to my attention. It also, that experience of being rejected in that way, gave me the experience of how people in authority very often get it wrong. That their judgment is really quite off in some ways, and that's been a theme as I've gone through my life, where I've been aware of when people who are in quite high positions of authority and are kind of guiding our society, like the politicians and so on, sometimes get it completely wrong, and they're not always to be relied on to get things right for everyone. And so when I began to look at the whole of our society, I could see that there were areas where I wasn't so sure that it should have been like that. And it came more into focus for me when I was 12 years old. I just finished the first year at our high school that I just moved to. In America, I think you'd call that the middle school. Is it sixth grade? That's that kind of time.
Yeah, middle school starts about, usually my middle school was 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and then you start high school in the 9th grade.
Okay, well, we're talking about sort of from 11 till 12 years old anyway. And at the end of that first year, I'd done very badly in exams. And as I hadn't done very well in the first school either, but it was a big class, and I began to be aware of the difference between, being towards the bottom of the class and being towards the top. And it seemed to me that the kids who were being valued and praised were the ones who were, getting the high marks, and I wasn't. And during the summer holidays, I was giving this some thought, and as I said, I'd begun to be aware of the differences in the strata in the society, which I'd felt increasingly were just not quite right in some way, and then thinking of myself as someone who wasn't doing very well at school, I began to think that, well, I'm a kind of loving sort of person. I think I'm a good person, and I may not be very good in class, but I'm a loving kind of person. I think if I go through my life being a loving kind of person, then things should work out all right. And I distinctly remember the day when I was at the tennis club where I was a member. There wasn't actually anybody else there at the time, and it was located in a very beautiful park and gardens. And I was walking around thinking about this and thinking, I can definitely see something wrong here. It's as if people aren't loving each other enough somehow. And I thought at that time, and this is what started me on my mission, I thought, I'm going to spend the rest of my life sorting this out. And those really were the exact words that I used, because I can so clearly remember myself thinking those words. So I say that when I started my mission, I was 12 years old. So what happened then? Of course, the first thing that happened was I became a teenager. And we all know what teenage boys can be like.
Oh, yes, we do.
We do.
Even the most loving teenage boy.
And so, of course, my mind turned to other things. And my mission sort of went on the back burner to some degree. But but also I was at that time going to church on Sunday evenings to, this was the Church of England, the one that the Queen's the head of. And of course, increasingly, I was looking for the love and looking for anything that gave me clues as to what love is and how love should work. And of course, I was hearing about the teachings of Jesus, and Jesus saying, you know, the kingdom of heaven is within, and love thy God with all thy heart and mind, love thy neighbor, and all these things ye shall do and more. And you should love and serve others as I have loved and served you. And this was the kind of thing I was wanting to hear. But as I looked around the congregation, I thought, I don't think we're getting this somehow. Somehow we're not kind of translating the teachings into practice. And it really bugged me. I really couldn't work this out, but I thought there's something about the way in which this is being taught to us by the church that somehow isn't quite working the way that I would like it to be. And at that time, I actually kind of walked away from the church, and I never really came back until something happened a bit later on, which I'll just come around to. But I had been going to Southern Ireland whilst I was going through my teenage years, when my parents would take the family there on holiday, and we'd been staying in hotels, and I really liked the hotel atmosphere, or what seemed to be the whole kind of life of a hotel. And I thought that's the kind of that would suit me down to the ground. Because what I really liked about the idea of hotels was that it was service and giving people a really nice experience, making them feel at home and well looked after. And I thought, this is me. This is me. So when I came to the end of school, I went off to Scotland, where I was enrolled in the Scottish Hotel School to study hotel management, and I had a career in hotel management that took me right up into the 1980s. And it was during that time that I started having some experiences which led me more into, you know, what really is love about, and how do we really connect with it in a very deep and very meaningful way. And what did this for me was that during the 1970s, I'd had my own hotel business with a partner. Both of us had been to this hotel school, and we were doing very well, to quite a good degree. And there came a time when there was a lot of trouble in the British economy. The government had gone into battle with the coal mining unions, and we'd had extended periods of time when we had electricity only 3 days a week, and it devastated the business. And I thought to myself, there must be some way of being able to make things right somehow, to do things in the right kind of way so that things work out properly. And I gave this a lot of thought, and said to myself, there must be some way of kind of aligning myself with some bigger principle of some sort, like a kind of universal principle, like the laws of nature, or the will of God, and somehow to be so aligned with it that in a kind of spontaneous sort of way, I'd be able to be the right person, doing the right thing in the right place at the right time in the right way. You know, for everything to be right. And I mean, you know, how sort of naive might that be? But it led me forward on my path to find the next clue, as it were, to what I was looking for. And I had met somebody shortly after that in Edinburgh, which is where the hotel was, who was practicing transcendental meditation. And I said to him, what's that all about? And he said, it's about fulfilling your own potential. Well, that sounded right to me. And I'd had actually an experience shortly before then when we'd been asked to do the catering for a big convention that was going on in Edinburgh, a radiology congress. We were doing catering for 3 really big prestige companies, and it was big prestige catering, which we'd never done on that kind of scale before. And during the 4 days when it was on, everything was going perfectly. It was like I felt as if I was in the zone, like the athletes say. And at the end of the week, I said to my partner, whatever it was that went on this week, that's how I want it to be all the time. I want this feeling of being in the zone. And this all kind of built up to the idea that there must be something, someplace inside me, which would enable me somehow to kind of be in that zone, doing things in the right kind of way. Shortly after that, I learnt the transcendental meditation technique, and the next year, in fact, I heard about a new community that was being set up in the northwest of England, where they were practicing an advanced form of transcendental meditation called yogic flying. And I learned how to do this and went off to the community and actually spent the whole of the 1980s there, doing some very good work, some very good service work. But I had the experience through this transcendental meditation of a completely different state of consciousness than I'd ever experienced before. And this was called the transcendental consciousness, which is kind of deeper and beyond the normal range of consciousness. And it gave me the idea, which I still subscribe to today, that transcendental field of consciousness is somehow allied to what the church was talking about when it talked about a spiritual dimension of consciousness that we were all somehow connected to. And I began to appreciate what the church had been telling me all those years before, but which I'd never properly clued into at that time. And it was the experience of that state of consciousness that was beyond the normal waking state and the dreaming state and the deep sleep state that I was normally used to. And it began to show me that there was a state of consciousness there that is always there, but which is not always in the kind of the sort of surface of our awareness. And it was somehow in that state of consciousness that I was going to find the most powerful levels of spirituality, if you like, of love and peace and connection, particularly with other people.
One thing I wanted to ask your thoughts on or get your feelings about is that state of being in the zone. It's interesting because when you're in the zone, you're not thinking about being in the zone. In sort of like being in that meditative state, it's like when you get there, you're really not thinking. You're sort of removed from yourself. You're in that silent, still space where you just allow yourself to be. It does seem to be a challenge as we, and I know because I meditate every morning, and it's a completely different experience for me and a completely different energy level, if you will, flow, if you will, as the energy that once I sit down in front of the computer draws me back into this reality. And it does seem to be a challenge to stay in that zone no matter what practice you have and how much you know it's there. Do you find the same thing?
The thing is with transcendental meditation that through continuing practice, that feeling of being in the transcendental state begins to come into one's surface awareness. And they say that the next state of consciousness above the transcendental state, which they consider to be the fourth state, is the state where it coexists, transcendental coexists with the waking state, and you permanently have that very settled, very peaceful state, which will remain with you. And in fact, it has remained with me. It remained with me clearly for 20 years after I finished that time I had with the Transcendental Meditation people in the 1980s. So it's that it becomes a permanent state of being in which you then have that access to that deeper, fuller state of consciousness. And that state of consciousness takes you into what they call the field of all possibilities and the field of natural law, the field of the laws of nature, which I've come to understand is where the deepest state of love is located. And I'll come back to that in a moment, if you wouldn't mind. Sure. But that state of being in the zone is, I would say, similar or parallel to that state of having that deeper state of consciousness coexisting with your normal waking state. So it's possible to get into that state all the time. And what I've come to believe, and I come to teach now, is that without necessarily having to meditate, without necessarily having to find how to get into that zone, if we recognize that there is that spiritual dimension to ourselves, to our being, and if we identify ourselves with that sufficiently, we can draw on it. We can draw on it in rather the same way that some of the teachers talk about the law of attraction, how you can kind of make things happen from somewhere or other in the kind of subconscious, or from the universe, or from some sort of other place than one's normal state of being. If you can recognize that you have access to that greater dimension of oneself, you can actually draw that out, and you can draw the power of it out as well. And that was something that I had never experienced before I had the experience of the transcendental consciousness. So now I ask people to begin to acknowledge and to recognize that we do have that spiritual dimension to our lives, that dimension that has always been a kind of a vague sense of it existing, but not really quite knowing how to access it and where it is.
Earlier you said that now is the time. If you could speak a little bit to the change that you've seen from that awakening, or as you and I, again, not pretending that we haven't talked before, as you and I have discussed before, I think we both feel that all children probably have some sort of experience that opens them, or we just come in open, and it's a matter of whether we remember it or not. It's not that these are, the ability to love, the ability to do all of the things that you're talking about. They're not unique to me. They're not unique to you. They're abilities that we all have, and we all come into the world with some sort of awareness. It just, we forget as we grow up. But with that awareness that you had, that you remember, what has the evolution been from now till then that you've seen in the world?
Well, most of the change that I've seen in the world has happened during the last few years. And what I would say is that the other thing that I've been studying a lot of is something called the Mayan calendar, which many of the listeners might have heard of, certainly in the context of the idea that December 21st, 2012 was going to be the end of the world, or something major was going to happen on that particular day. And that relates to the supposed ending of the Mayan calendar. And the Mayan calendar was something that was laid down in South America and kind of Yucatan Peninsula area about 5,000 years ago, and it actually charts the development of something over the eons of time, right back to the time of the Big Bang. And I had studied this through the writings of a Swedish scientist and researcher by the name of Carl Kalleman, who's now a friend of mine. And he had charted this period of time against the history that we all know of the way in which the universe and the planet has evolved over the billions of years, and right up to the present day, he charted how history, the kind of human history that we know about, exactly parallels the progress of the Mayan calendar. Now, I'll spare the listeners the details of this, but what it shows is and this is Carl Kalleman's interpretation. What it shows is an evolution, not of the physical world so much as the evolution of consciousness. And what he shows is how human consciousness especially has expanded with its terms of reference. I'll just explain what I mean by that in a second. Over the centuries, to the point now where we've reached the end point of that process of evolution of consciousness. And now is the time when we should start seeing the outward expression of what has been achieved or fulfilled or completed at this particular time. And just to illustrate what I was saying, I would say, in the various cycles of time in the Mayan calendar, we've got an increasingly greater frame of reference from, for example, we lived in a tribe, we lived in a region of country, we associated ourselves then in the next phase with being a member of a nation like of the United States or Great Britain. And then in the period which started at the time when the Industrial Revolution started, we began to have a planetary frame of reference, during which time we learnt that we live on a planet and there's a planetary environment and ecosphere, and we have to look after the planet. And we've had all these movements about save the planet in this time. And then one of the most recent cycles gave us a galactic frame of reference, where the Hubble telescope, for example, showed us what the galaxy looks like, what the different planets look like. And even more so, most recently, is we've gained a more universal frame of reference in which we begin to understand that we're part of the universe, and we know our place in the universe in a kind of, if you like, geographical sense. And we begin to grow ourselves into being a member of not just the human race, but also the galactic civilization, whatever it may be, and the whole of the universe.
Phillip,
So-
could I get your thoughts on this? I think would be a good time to ask you this question. We talk about the Mayans, we talk about the Incas, we talk about the Aztecs, we talk about a lot of indigenous peoples and their understands, their beliefs, which seemed already lent to lean towards, or were in practice actually embracing that universal consciousness, that connection to all things. And now we're coming back to it after going down the path of apartness, of disconnection, of ego, self, if you will. Do you have any thoughts on why there were those two really divergent paths of evolution, and why for the last couple hundred years especially, this one path seemed to win out over the other?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, that there have been these divergent paths, and I think there could be several reasons. I mean, one of them could be, for example, that in a sense we have to have a broader appreciation of all the different possible paths before we can then perhaps go back if necessary, onto one that we feel is the right path, and we may indeed find ourselves going back to the more of the kind of lifestyle that the Native Americans had and other indigenous peoples, but also this period of the development of technology has enabled us to understand life in all its aspects, down to the most microscopic and up to the infinity of the universe, in a way that previously there might have been some awareness in some form amongst the indigenous peoples, but now we have the ability to really go into the fine details of exactly how it all works, and also make things happen at that sort of level. And I think to quite a degree, we can justify the development of all these technologies, even though some of the technologies we use very badly and very destructively. But perhaps we could say that overall we're finding our way to understanding how life works in a way that, as we become more spiritually enlightened, if you like, we will begin to use in a much more positive way. And I think what we see throughout this whole process is a process, and there will be fits and starts and ups and downs, and we'll trip ourselves up as we go along the process. But it's almost as if there's a kind of cosmic drama going on.
You know what else occurred to me while you were talking that I'm sure it's been floating in my head, but I've never verbalized it before. Isn't it some sort of interesting sort of cosmic Freudian slip that we always refer to the natives in any country as indigenous people, as if somehow Western culture isn't indigenous?
Yes, I mean, I would say, yeah, I would agree with that. And I think one has to look back at the origins of some of the major races and say, did they actually spring from what you could genuinely call indigenous roots? And to be honest, I don't know the answer to that. I mean,
I didn't either. I just thought it sort of popped into my head all of a sudden, and it seemed a significant thing to observe, that we define all these other peoples who live on every continent in the world as indigenous, with the exception of ourselves. We never refer to the people that came from Europe as indigenous, and that seems telling to me. It seems very Freudian.
Yes.
Why are we not referring to ourselves as indigenous? What is in that?
Well, maybe different peoples have different qualities, different characters, and different ways of living. But I think what this whole process leads to, as I was saying about the Mayan calendar, is the evolution of consciousness actually leads us to a unity consciousness, where everything is unified together into what ideally would be a harmonious, effective wholeness, which is highly integrated within itself in some way, integrating all the differences, all the different tendencies, every aspect is integrated into a wholeness which we all recognize ourselves to be essentially part of. That is that we recognize that there is a kind of a oneness, and it's actually a oneness of consciousness, which will express itself in an infinity of different ways. But there is essentially this one consciousness of which we are all a part, and it's this, to a very large degree, I think you could say it's a spiritual consciousness that is expressed through, for example, the physical body that we have, and also through the physical environment that we live in. but that's what it is. There's a unity consciousness that we're all part of, and the I think the most relevant nature of that unity consciousness is love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is how it is most appropriately and best understood and expressed. So, to my mind, love is the one thing that we can all fairly readily relate to and feel comfortable in making more use of, experiencing it more, connecting with people on the level of love,
Right.
which is, I mean, there are many dimensions of it, such as unconditional love, and also love which is based on service and compassion and regard and gratitude and appreciation and all the different aspects of love. But I think what we're looking at here is exactly as you say, Kip, it's just love.
Right.
You know, love is the one thing I think that will characterize this state that we're now bringing to its completion, to its fulfillment.
And I've heard it described, and I feel that this is at least the best that I can understand it, is that whether you call it love, infinity, God, whatever, this infinite unknowable force that all creation, all infinite aspects of creation, all infinite experience of creation springs forth from, is if and as you said, we are innately a part of that. It is us. We are not it. It is us. It is me. It is you. Love is me. Love is us. We are not it. It in the absolute that we can return to of love, of infinity, of God, again, however you want to define that. All of these things that we are experiencing as creation, these amazingly intricate tapestries that we have the experience of, would just be abstract as the absolute one consciousness, one love, one God, however, again, you want to define that. But by coming to have these experiences where we feel a part, but we're really not, we are actually the experience of love experiencing itself, experiencing its own concepts. Because think, and not to be too poetic or dramatic, but how lonely would it be for love not to have someone to share this with, or something to share this with? And in order to have something to share it with, we have to feel these things are real.
Absolutely. I think you're exactly right. I do. And I
just
think
want to interject.
that's
Sorry.
all right. No. You know, and now really is the time, I think, when really we all need to kind of really clue into this as a reality. And that's, I mean, I was very keen a few years ago on explaining to people what this Mayan calendar was all about, and how it all worked, and how you could see that there was this process going on. We were just about to reach this point where everything would come together. But I found that it was kind of difficult for people to really kind of relate to in a meaningful way. And I kind of got a bit stuck on that until I realized that what we're talking about here is love as being the what it is we're all coming to at this point. And it was at that point that I started looking around to see if I could find a group to work with that was working with love, inspiring people to love. And of course I came across the Love Foundation, and this was back in 2010, I think, and I began to start supporting the Love Foundation, thinking that they were, you know, doing absolutely the right thing at the right time, in the right way. They were the right people to do it. And I did more and more with them, and then they invited me to join the board, which I was very happy to do, and I'm still with them today. And what they've been finding over the 15 years that they've been working together is that there's been an almost exponential increase in the interest in love from the public. And we're all so fortunate now to have the internet, whereby we can communicate with people, connect with people all over the world, that people are finding the Love Foundation more and more and more. And the Love Foundation has several Facebook pages, and the main page, the Love Foundation page, just only a very few years ago had just a few thousand likes on it. But just in the last very few years, the rate of increase in the number of likes has gone through an exponential increase, and now it's over 250,000. And we're finding that now is the time when more and more people are, in whatever way, beginning to connect with the whole concept of love and the need for love, and the reality of how love can change the world.
You know, when it really something jumped out at me. It's interesting that it was around 2012, because it was during the presidential election cycle. And I pointed this out to a few people, and but you can go see, if you look at pictures from the Democratic convention, every single placard, and I thought this was really worth taking note of, that no one really mentioned. Every placard from every state that the delegates were holding up, every one of them had the word love wrapped around it. And I thought that was so phenomenal. That where did that come from in this bizarre political process that we have while we're going through this presidential election? Who decided to add love to, you know what I'm talking about, Philip, the big polls that they hold up that say I'm from Iowa or I'm from Texas. And, you know, every single delegate holds these up. You have a whole convention center filled with these polls saying what state you're from. And around every single one of those, it said love. And I thought, wow, that is really worth making note of. Where did that come from, and who decided to do that, and why?
Yes, and more people are waking up to the virtue of centering themselves in love, above and beyond anything else.
Yep.
And this is a wonderful thing to see, especially at this time when you look around the world and you see all this stuff going on, and you think, oh, we really do need to get beyond this sort of thing. And when I talk about the idea that this whole process of evolution of consciousness and unity consciousness has come to this time now, and now is the time, and you look at the world, you say, well, come on, you know, where is it? Where is it? But it seems to me that this process is reaching a point now, and it's like I said a few minutes ago, it's like there's this cosmic drama going on. And the script for this cosmic drama was written, you know, eons ago, but it's coming to the great denouement at this moment in time now, when, despite all, like every good play, you know, at the end of the play, there are all these different things going on, and somehow out of all this seeming chaos, and you don't know who are the heroes and who are the villains, some great denouement comes, where it suddenly comes to its fruition, its completion, and everything has worked out perfectly in some amazing kind of way. And I really do believe that this is what's going to happen over the course of the next few years. But one of the things, in fact, I think the thing that will make it happen fastest and most comfortably for everyone is just love.
Yes.
And regardless of whatever else we see going on in the
Yep.
world, if we can only center ourselves in love and just spend as much of our time as we can every day in a state of loving and service to others, and compassion and gratitude and appreciation, all of these different aspects of love, it will make this whole process of unraveling all of this stuff that's going on in the most in the kind of the like nature does, in the kind of least action it will all happen in perfectly in the easiest, the most comfortable way. And
Well,
it's
as you know, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, that was the, idea behind the Just Love movement. As I talked to so many people, so many, people out in the world doing the work of love, all with really sort of different focuses. Like somebody would be focusing on making sure everyone had bathrooms, or, oh my God, the violence on television, or whatever, and all well-meaning, but all sort of missing the point a little bit. And what occurred to me is that while we're running around rearranging deck chairs in the Titanic, which is really what we're doing by just addressing these surface issues, that unless we all of us who are in this love movement, who are awake and aware to the power of love, unless we understand that the most important thing we need to do is to move ourselves from this institutionalized foundation of fear that we've been operating from millennia, that things are likely to happen exactly the way they have throughout history, unless we start operating from a new foundation. And that's what feels really significantly different to me, is that we're coming together to form a new foundation to operate from.
Yes, and the stronger we make it, the faster it's all going to turn in the right kind of direction. And in fact, this month now, September 25th to the 27th, there's going to be a summit at the United Nations in New York on sustainable development. And they're working on an agenda. They call it Transforming the World by 2030. And it's actually published already on the internet. I think it's sustainabledevelopment.un.org. And it is astounding to read. The agenda they have for creation or completion by 2030 is, to my mind, everything that we would want to see. In just about every aspect you can think of, they want to achieve the kind of goals that I think many, if not most people, would just love to see coming to completion. And they're launching this month, and their intention, and of course the United Nations is kind of a more sort of an advisory body at this stage, but it is the General Assembly is made up of heads of state and the high representatives of nations all around the world. And their common objective would be, or their common agreement would be, to make this happen. But again, when you look at the world as it is today, you think, how on earth is it going to happen? Nevertheless, the United Nations is saying this is what the world needs. This is what the world is asking for.
And that's it right there. It's not a matter of how it's going to happen. It has to happen. It's not what the world wants now. It's what the world needs now. And I think that is just so important for people to take note of. Is this isn't really, whether we continue to be in this experience as we are or not, isn't really the point. The point is, if we do want to continue to have time here and have a sustainable future for our children's children, and all other life for the time that we're supposed to have this, then we need to decide what we want to be. And in order to be that, we will have to start doing the things that will allow us to have that sustainable future.
That's right. That's right. And so, those of us who are working with love in whatever capacity are wanting to inspire everyone to get into love, to really understand the power of love and how it can be expressed in one's life and in the life of the community and the greater world. So. And that's why I've created the course that I created earlier on this year, which is called Learn to Love More, and it's on my newliving.org website. It's also on the Udemy online learning system, which is the biggest system in the world with millions of students. And it's also on YouTube, on the Love Foundation's channel and the New Living TV's channel. And on YouTube, it's called A Free Course in Unconditional Love. So if anyone would like to see it, do a search on YouTube for A Free Course in Unconditional Love. And as I say, on the newliving.org website, it's called Learn to Love More. Again, it's a free course, quite a long course. It would take about 3 hours to go through, but there are also working sheets as well. There are 48 short videos, but it goes through a whole process of really from sort of ground up, really. First of all, it starts talking about how to open the heart more. And I don't doubt we can all of us open our hearts more, because the heart is an infinite energy, where we really experience the love most in our hearts, and then from it, opening the heart, we develop an understanding that we have this great power of love within us, which is there for us to use, to access and to use. And the way to do that is to recognize that we are essentially spiritual beings. We're not our body, we're not separate from other people, we're definitely not just our ego, but we are, if you like, and for want of a better word, a soul, a spiritual soul, which is connected to the wholeness of life.
Yes.
And it's through identifying ourselves as the soul, as our soul, as a soul, that we can draw out of ourselves the greater power of love, and bring that into our lives through love for ourselves, first of all, and then also love for our family and friends, and love in the workplace, and in any kind of groups that we're in. And love in the wider world in whatever way we would choose to do it. And it could be that we would simply be who we are and radiate love without necessarily doing anything more than that. Or it could be that we would serve, go into service in some way and just do whatever we feel we can.
And Philip, we're actually running out of time. If you could, and first of all, I want to thank you again for coming back and redoing this. And then if you can give the website where everyone could find you, that would be tremendous.
Thank you.
But again, thank you so much, and just overflowing love to you.
Thank you very much, Kip, and the same to you and to all the listeners. Thank you. And my website again is New Living, which is New Living, one word, newliving.org. There is the Love Foundation website, which is www.thelovefoundation.com. And actually, I think those are just the two that I'll give
Perfect.
you for the moment.
Great. Well,
thank you very much.
Thank you again, and thank you everyone for joining me again on the Just Love Show on WLOR.net, WRock. And remember, you, as Philip just said, you don't have to do anything at all. Just love, and go from there. Just start with that. Just open your heart, open your soul, open your mind, let go, and just love. Have a wonderful evening all. Take care. Bye-bye.